The story begins in a small Tennessee town, where 26-year-old Jackson Reed spends his nights performing at dusty bars and roadside diners. His voice is soulful, filled with that deep Southern charm that reminds people of Elvis Presley, his lifelong idol. But no matter how passionately Jackson sings, his audience is small and his tips are smaller. Still, he never stops dreaming. One day, he gets a rare opportunity, an open audition for a veteran talent scout who once worked with Colonel Tom Parker, the same man who managed Elvis himself. Jackson walks into the studio wearing his late father's old leather jacket, his lucky guitar slung over his shoulder. He performs "Can't Help Falling in Love" with everything he's got, every note trembling with emotion and hope. But when he finishes, the scout just sighs. "You've got a great voice," he says, "but you're too old. At 26, it's too late to start. Elvis was already a legend by now." The words hit Jackson like a punch to the chest. For a moment, he just stands there, trying to hold back tears. The scout leaves, and Jackson is left staring at the empty room, the sound of rejection echoing louder than applause ever could. That night, Jackson drives home in silence. He sits in his small kitchen, staring at his guitar, the one his father gave him before he passed away. His mother walks in quietly and says, "Elvis faced rejection too, you know. But he didn't stop. Don't you stop either." Her words light a fire in Jackson's heart. He picks up his guitar, strums softly, and whispers to himself, "One day they'll listen. It's the spark that will change his life forever." Months pass since Jackson Reed's painful rejection. Yet every night he practiced, in his garage, at open mics, and on empty streets. His mother's words still echoed in his heart. "Don't you stop either." Then, one morning, an email arrived that made his hands tremble, an invitation to audition for America's Got Talent in Los Angeles. It felt unreal. He had less than $200 in savings, but he sold his old motorcycle to buy a bus ticket. For Jackson, this was all or nothing. When he arrived at the massive AGT stage, he stood among hundreds of hopeful contestants, dancers, magicians, singers, dreamers. Everyone looked younger, flashier, more confident. Jackson felt out of place in his worn boots and old leather jacket, the same one his father used to wear. But as he tightened the strap of his guitar, he whispered, "For you, Dad." Moments later, a stagehand called his name. The heavy black curtain opened, and Jackson stepped into the blinding lights of the AGT stage. Thousands watched from the audience. The judges, Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Howie Mandel, and Heidi Klum, looked up from their desks. Simon squinted, curious. "You're 26? he asked, his tone half skeptical, half amused. Jackson smiled softly and nodded. "Yes, sir. I guess I'm what some people might call too old." The audience chuckled gently. Simon raised an eyebrow. "Let's see what too old sounds like." Jackson took a deep breath, fingers trembling over the strings. Then, under the golden spotlight, he began to sing. "Suspicious Minds." The first note echoed through the hall, rich, soulful, and hauntingly familiar. The crowd fell silent, and Simon leaned forward, eyes widening. The moment had finally begun. As the first chords of "Suspicious Minds" filled the AGT auditorium, the atmosphere shifted. The audience, which had been politely attentive, suddenly grew still, as if caught in a spell. Jackson Reed's voice wasn't just impressive, it was timeless. Deep and resonant, it carried the spirit of Elvis Presley yet remained uniquely his own. Every lyric dripped with emotion, every note raw with the pain of years spent chasing a fading dream. Simon Cowell, known for his tough critiques, leaned forward, his skeptical expression slowly melting into awe. "No way," he muttered under his breath. Sofia Vergara placed a hand over her heart, visibly moved. Even Howie and Heidi exchanged glances, their smiles growing wider with every verse. Jackson didn't just sing, he lived the song. When he hit the chorus, "We can't go on together, with suspicious minds," his voice soared through the theater, powerful and pure. The crowd erupted into applause mid-song, unable to contain themselves. Jackson didn't falter. He closed his eyes and gave everything he had left inside him. By the final note, he was drenched in sweat, his chest heaving. For a moment there was silence. Then a roar. The entire audience leapt to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears. The camera zoomed in on Simon Cowell, who sat speechless, his jaw slightly open, eyes shining with genuine emotion. Jackson looked out at the crowd, stunned. He had dreamed of this moment 1,000 times, but the real thing was beyond imagination. The same man once told he was too old, now stood before a roaring audience, proving that passion doesn't fade with age, it matures. And for the first time, the world truly listened. The applause thundered through the AGT arena like a wave, echoing in Jackson Reed's chest. He stood frozen under the warm stage lights, his guitar still in his hands, blinking in disbelief at the standing ovation before him. The same man who'd once been told he was too old, now had an entire theater chanting his name. Tears welled in his eyes, but he tried to hold them back, breathing shakily as the cheers continued. Simon Cowell slowly rose from his seat. The crowd quieted, waiting for his verdict, that famous mix of truth and judgment. "Jackson," Simon began, his voice softer than usual. "I've heard thousands of Elvis covers over the years. Most of them are just imitations, echoes. But what you did just now, it wasn't an imitation. It was a resurrection." The audience gasped, hanging on his every word. "You made Elvis proud tonight." The emotion was too much for Jackson. His lip quivered as he whispered a shaky, "Thank you." Then, something incredible happened. Simon glanced toward the golden buzzer in front of him. The audience began to scream, chanting, "Hit it! Hit it! Hit it!" Simon smiled, almost teasingly, before slamming his hand down. Boom! Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, filling the stage in shimmering light. Jackson dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, covering his face as the confetti rained over him. His dream, his impossible, too late, never gonna happen dream, had just come true. Simon stood smiling proudly, and Sophia wiped away a tear. As Jackson looked up, arms spread wide under the glittering shower, he saw his mother in the audience, crying with joy. For the first time, his heart didn't ache, it soared. The world had finally heard him. Backstage, the roar of the crowd still echoed faintly as Jackson Reed sat alone in a quiet corner, golden confetti clinging to his jacket. His hands trembled as he held a single piece of that confetti between his fingers, a symbol of everything he had fought for. Beside him rested his father's old guitar, the same one he had carried through every rejection, every sleepless night, every tiny stage that barely noticed him. Tonight, that same guitar had played its way into millions of hearts. The backstage door opened slightly, and Simon Cowell stepped in, still smiling. "You did something special out there," he said softly. "People felt it. That's rare." Jackson stood, unsure what to say. "Thank you, sir. I just wanted to prove that it's never too late." Simon nodded. "You didn't just prove it, you reminded us." Then, with a rare grin, he added, "If Elvis's manager could see this, he'd eat his words." Later, during his post-performance interview, Jackson faced the camera surrounded by lights and microphones. A reporter asked, "What would you say to those who told you 26 was too old to start?" Jackson smiled, eyes glistening. "I'd say maybe 26 was the perfect age to be ready." The crew applauded softly. His mother, watching from behind the curtain, wiped a tear, whispering, "Your dad would be so proud." As Jackson walked out into the cool Los Angeles night, he looked up at the sky and whispered, "We did it, Dad." Somewhere deep inside, he felt peace, not because of the fame, but because he'd kept his promise, never to stop singing. The boy once rejected had become the man the world couldn't stop listening to.